Welcome to Wheelock's Latin, Chapter 16. In this chapter, we're going to be looking at third declension adjectives, and we'll be looking at the various uses of adjectives. First, let's do a quick review of first and second declension adjectives. Adjectives in Latin are in two basic categories, first and second declension and third declension. If you'll remember from chapter 7 maybe, we looked at and learned first and second declension adjectives. These are simply adjectives that have three forms, a masculine, feminine, and neuter form, and the endings for these adjectives follow the endings for first and second declension nouns. So in the masculine, it's us, o, o, orum, is, os, is. In the plural, it's I, arum, is, as, is. And in the second declension neuter, it was o, orum, is, a, is. And here, of course, is the the declension for the adjective bonus, bona, bonum. That means good. So this is a standard first and second declension adjective form that we have used quite a bit. Now, in this chapter, we're going to add third declension adjectives. Now, there's really good news here. If you managed to master your third declension noun endings, specifically the subcategory third declension I stem, then this chapter is not going to be a problem. Let's take a look at this. If you notice at the far left of the chart here, you will see your third declension I stem endings. Masculine and feminine were the same. Neuter was similar, just slightly different. If you remember, the masculine feminine was blank is em, es, eum, ibis, es, ibis. And then in the neuter, it was blank is blank ia, eum, ibis, ia, ibis. Now, the only difference shift we're going to make here is that for third declension adjectives, we're going to use not just an I in the neuter ablative, but it's going to be in all the ablative forms. So you can see they're masculine and feminine. Instead of having the letter E in ablative singular, it will also be an I in ablative singular, just like it is in neuter. So this is it. This is the form. If you, again, learned your third declension I stem endings, you know these forms. All you have to do is remember that for these, you will use an I in the ablative singular, masculine and feminine. Now, if you look here, there are three different categories of third declension adjectives. Three different categories of third declension adjectives. Here's the first grouping. The first grouping is a set of adjectives that have three different endings in the nominative. That is to say, in the nominative singular masculine, it has one form. In the nominative singular feminine, it has another form. And in the neuter nominative singular, it has a third form. In this example, you can see the word acer, acris, acre. This is the masculine, feminine, and neuter forms. Now, as you decline them, you will simply look to the feminine form to find your stem. ACR is the stem. And when you use that stem across all the forms, singular and plural, you simply add to it your third declension I stem endings. And you end up with in the masculine, acer, acris, acri, acrem, acri, acres, acrium, acribis, acres, acribis. In the feminine, you end up with acris, acris, acri, acrem, acri, acres, acrium, acribis, acres, acribis. And in the neuter, you have acre, acris, acri, acre, acri, acria, acrium, acribis, acria, acribis. Of course, remember your neuter rule, which is whatever is in the nominative form will also be in the accusative form. So nominative singular and accusative singular are acre, and nominative and accusative plural are acria. So this is how you form all of the third declension adjectives with the three endings. So you just remember that masculine, feminine, neuter all have three different forms in the nominative singular. Now, in addition to three endings, adjectives, we also have adjectives that have two endings in the nominative singular. Here we have the example, fortis, fortis, forte. You can see that masculine and feminine have the exact same form. fortis, and fortis. It's only in the neuter that we have a second form, forte. Again, you can find the stem by simply looking at the masculine feminine form, fort, F-O-R-T, and to that you add your endings. Neuter, of course, will have its third declension I stem neuter endings. So as you can see, the masculine and feminine have the exact same forms across both singular and plural, and neuter is very similar, only deviating in the nominative and accusative singular, as well as the nominative and accusative plural. Now, that leaves us the final category of third declension adjectives, and these are adjectives that have one ending in the nominative singular. Here we look at the example potens. In the masculine, feminine, and neuter, it all has the exact same form, potens, potens, potens. The masculine and feminine, of course, will have the third declension I stem masculine and feminine endings, and the neuter will have the third declension I stem neuter endings. So the only place you'll see, again, variations are in the nominative and accusative singular and in the nominative and accusative plural. So this should be, again, pretty simple. If you learned your third declension I stem endings, the only thing you have to remember is that you will have the I in the ablative singular in masculine, feminine, and neuter. Aside from that, you're going to have a pretty easy time remembering these forms, I do believe. Now, the last thing we want to look at is the uses of the adjectives. And actually, before we move on, I do want to remind you this. Either first or second declension adjectives or third declension adjectives, either category can be used to modify any noun, whether it was a first declension and second declension noun or a third declension noun. So keep in mind that the rule has always been that a noun and an adjective have to agree in case, number, and gender. That does not always mean they will have the exact same endings. So again, you could have a noun from first declension being modified by a third declension adjective. They will not have the same endings at all, but they will agree, hopefully, in case, number, and gender, if it is correct. So let's look at the various uses of the adjectives. The various uses of the adjectives. Now, several of these, we're going to look at 4 of them, and I think we should know 3 out of the 4, and we'll just be learning one new one. The first category is the attributive adjectives. These are adjectives that attribute a quality to a noun. So a simple sentence would be, the great poet loves the beautiful girl. The great poet. Great is attributing an attribute to the noun poet. It's the great poet. And he is loving the beautiful girl. So the girl is being given the attribute of beauty. In Latin, this word would be magnus poeta puellam pulchram amat. The great poet loves the beautiful girl. Now, just a reminder, most frequently adjectives will follow the noun that they modify. However, if it is a noun that has an attribute of quantity or quality, or if it is a demonstrative pronoun, a demonstrative adjective, then it will come in front of the noun that it modifies. Here, the word magnus is an attribute of quality, and so therefore it comes in front of the word poeta. On the other hand, pulchram is just an adjective modifying puellam, giving it the quality of beauty, and so it's following the noun puellam. So that's the attributive adjective. And again, we've looked at many examples of these so far. Second category is the predicate adjective. These are adjectives that are in the predicate that modifies the subject. Now, in case you don't remember what a predicate is, the predicate is anything from the verb and following. Anything from the verb and following in the sentence is considered the predicate. Everything to the left of the verb in English, in an English sentence, is considered the subject. So in this simple sentence, the poet is great, the poet is the subject, and is great is the predicate. Here we have the adjective great that is modifying poet, but it's in the predicate. So this is called a predicate adjective. Here's the Latin version of that sentence, poeta est magnus, the poet is great. And just as a reminder, you may be wondering, why isn't magnus and poeta have the same ending? Again, They don't necessarily have to have the same ending. They just have to agree in case, number, and gender. And even though poeta is a first declension noun, it is a masculine first declension noun. So therefore, the adjective great, magnus, needs to be the masculine form. Here, masculine nominative singular, just as poeta is masculine nominative singular. So that's the predicate adjective use of the adjective. Here's the third use. It is called the substantive adjective. And I know we've looked at these so far in our studies. The adjective is used in place of a noun. Here's a simple example. Good overcomes evil, or good men overcome evil men. You don't necessarily have to have the word men here. We use that in the phrase like the good die young. What do we mean when we say that? We mean that the good men die young. Here we have good men overcome evil men. So boni in Latin, nominative plural since it's the subject of the sentence, and masculine since we're intending men. If you had intended good women, you would use the feminine boni, nominative plural. Boni, malos, superant. Malos is the direct object, so therefore it needs to be accusative plural. And again, since it is referring to men, it needs to be masculine, accusative plural. And then, of course, your verb superant. So boni, malos, superant. Now, the final category of adjective uses is going to be new to you. Let's walk us through it here. This is called the objective complement. This describes the result of the action of the verb on the direct object. So here's an example. She calls her daughters precious. Now the subject is she, the verb is calls, and daughters is the direct object. She calls her daughters, but she's calling them precious. Here, this is the word precious is describing the result of the action. This is the result of her calling the direct object, which is daughters, and she is calling them precious. That's the result. And so consequently, this adjective needs to agree with the word daughters in case, number, and gender. So here we have vokat, she calls, philios, the direct object, accusative plural, philios, daughters. She calls the daughters keras, precious, accusative, feminine, plural, adjective modifying philios. Here's one more example to help solidify this. Virtue made the men brave. Virtue made the men brave. So here again, virtue is doing the action. Made is our verb. Men is our direct object. And brave is our objective complement. It is essentially complementing or completing the direct object. It is, again, the result of the action. It's the result here of the making of the men. And so in the Latin, it is virtus. That's virtue. Fecit. Made, perfect tense. Virtue made viros, direct object, accusative plural. Virtue made the men. Virtus fecit viros, brave, fortes. So this is a third declension adjective, and it is accusative plural masculine to agree in case, number, and gender with viros, of which it is the complement, objective complement. So these are the four uses of adjectives that you're going to want to be familiar with. We'll talk more about these in class. Don't forget to study your vocabulary. We'll have a quiz over these vocabulary words later this week. Have a good day.